All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is Shawn here at Zyxel. I am the product manager for our Nebula cloud management platform. And today we'll be going through some best pet practices, some tips and tricks, and just explaining maybe some of the features that tend to be misunderstood or overlooked. As we go through today, if you have any questions, send them in using chat as part of the Zoom interface, and I'll do my best to answer those. Just a heads up, I am here at our office, and unfortunately, the internet has gone down twice today and the power has temporarily gone off, which is odd because the weather is just normal, boring overcast. There is construction, some pretty serious construction about a block away, so I'm wondering if maybe that's what's causing it. So if for some reason I disappear for a while or you get kicked out of the webinar, I will join back in as soon as I can and try to resume the webinar. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing to talk about is how Nebula organizes your customers. So the difference between an organization and a site. So when you go into Nebula and the first time you are creating or trying to use Nebula, it will prompt you to create an org and it will prompt you to create a site. So for most of you who are on this webinar, you should be MSPs or VARs or system integrators. So generally, as a good rule of thumb, each of your customers will be their own unique organization. And then if they have multiple locations, those will each be a site. So by default, you do have to have one org and one site in order to use it. So this is just showing here, when you get into the Nebula interface, it's pretty easy to jump between your customers. At the top of the screen, you've got a drop down, which has a list of all of your customers. Simply select your customer, select what site you want to edit, and it will automatically jump you over there. So it makes it really quick and simple to jump around. Now, so to begin with here, we'll start talking about organizations. So if you're using our optional Plus or Pro Pack licensing, that is based on the organization. Basically, you add licenses for each device in that org, and then it will convert that org from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro Pack. So another reason why you don't want to stick all of your customers in one organization and then have them each customer as their own individual site, because chances are you'll have some customers that need Pro or Plus Pack and some that just using the free version of Nebula is just fine. Another really key thing here is an organization can only have one owner. And that owner has access to some features that only they have access to. So because of that, you generally want to have a designated account or a designated employee at your company that creates all of the organizations. So that way you know which account owns it. If you've got a lot of different admins and they're each creating their own orgs for different customers, you end up in a situation where you need to have access to those org owner tools and you can't remember who the org owner is, or even worse, the org owner has left your company and the organization is still registered to their email account and you no longer have access to it. Now, once you have created an org, they can have an unlimited number of sites. So again, just to highlight here as a best practice, have at least one organization per customer. There may be situations where you may want to split your customer into two orgs. And usually that's due to licensing. You've got a customer that only one of their sites needs ProPack, so you split that organ or that site off into its own org, so you don't have to buy licenses for the other sites that don't need access to those Plus or ProPack features. Depending on the features you need, we've even had people split out and create a new org just for specific devices to reduce the number of licenses they need to purchase. The only issue you may run into that is depending on what features you have access to, those features may need, all devices to be on the same site in order to use those features. And there may be options there where just for ease of management, you've got a very large customer with lots of sites. You may want to split those up into geographic regions or something like that. So a tool that tends to get overlooked a lot. Actually, before we go on here, just another thing here when it comes to creating the orgs. You can create the organizations in advance. So again, as I was saying, it's a good idea to have one account or one user who is the owner for all of your customers. Ideally, that's, an owner or somebody very high up in the company. Um, but rather than needing to bug them every time you need to create a new organization, simply go in there and create a bunch of organizations in advance. Just leave them, unnamed one, unnamed two, etc. And then when your admins need to set up a new customer, they can simply go in, grab one of those organizations that has been created but hasn't been used for anything, and they can rename that organization and start configuring it when they need it. Okay, so going on here, when it comes to sites, we do have a bulk site creation tool. So if you've got a new customer, they've got a lot of sites, you don't have to do it one at a time. You can use this tool. When you get into the menu here for create site, by default, it takes you to the one site tab, but there is a multiple sites tab here, and then you can create as many as you want. Um, you can even create a template file to make it easy to import in multiple devices and assign them to different sites. But when you are creating these sites, you can have just the default blank configuration. You can also clone existing sites that may exist. So they start off with that other site's settings, and then you just need to change whichever needs to be modified for that particular site. We do have a template you can download and set up. So switching over here when it comes to your administrators. So the administrator access is based on two levels. There's an organization setting, and then there are site-based settings. So you start by creating an organization level access, and then you add site level access underneath that. So we'll go through each of these. There are 4 different organization levels that you have access. You have the owner. Again, there's only one of those. Full, read only, and none. So the owner is whoever created the organization by default. Um, and only the organization owner can transfer ownership to another account. So if for some reason you are splitting up the company or you're retiring and someone else is taking over, you will need to transfer that ownership to another admin, which is very easy to do. And basically, the owner has access to everything, including the ability to transfer licenses between organizations and between sites. So most of your admins, I think in most organizations, are going to have what's called full access, and that gives you access to all sites in that organization. And then for the most part, you have access to all the main configuration settings. Now, if you do have a user that needs more than just the standard full access, you can choose to delegate owner's authority. So that gives them most of the settings that the org owner has access to. The only thing that someone with full access that has been delegated owner authority can't do, they cannot delete organizations. They cannot delete existing owner or change access for that owner. And they cannot transfer ownership from one user to another. But otherwise, they have access to everything, including the ability to transfer licenses. The other level we have here is read only. And as that implies, you can see all of the sites in an organization. You can see all of the settings, but you can't make any changes to them. And then lastly, there's the level none. So you may be asking, well, why would I have an admin and give them none access? And the answer for that is because then you can go in. So by default, if your organization level is at none, they have access to none of the sites in that organization, none of that organization settings. But you can go in and provide site level access on a one-by-one basis by going over to the site level access controls. So you would do this, for instance, if you have some staff that you only need access to a few sites in an organization. That is how you would do it. You would set them up at org level none or org access control none, and then go in on a site basis, and on a site by site basis, you can control what access they have to. So this is very common where perhaps your customer wants the ability to log into Nebula, or maybe you've got an on-site IT guy that wants to be able to go into Nebula and config settings in the site that they are physically located at. So you can go in on a site-by-site basis and give them access, full access, which gives them all configuration and report access in the on the sites that you've given them specific access to. Read only. So again, they can see what's going on the site, they can monitor things, but they can't make any configuration changes. Monitor only. So monitor only is similar to read only, but it only gives them access to the monitor pages. It does not let them see the configurations. So with read only, you can see the monitor pages and you can see the configurations. You can't change it. With monitor only, you can only see those monitor or status pages. You cannot see the configurations. And then we've got a level here called installer. So installer is there for guys out in the field. So if you've been using Nebula for a while, you can do all of the configuration generally yourself in advance or at any time that you want. So the installer level basically just gives them the ability to scan QR codes and assign a device to a org and a site when they're doing the install. It also gives them access to some things like positioning the item on a Google map or taking a photo of where you've installed it. So extremely limited access because oftentimes your installers are third-party contractors that don't need access to anything else. And then the final level of access we have is guest ambassador. So this is for those of you that are doing some form of public hotspot or guest access where you want to use vouchers to control who has access to that hotspot network or the guest access network and for how long. So this is a level here which allows someone to go in and create guest accounts or create guest voucher codes, print those out and hand them off to people. So when it comes to setting administrator access, it's pretty straightforward. You go into the org menu there and you go into admins and choose create administrator. You need to give them a name and an email address. Then you can choose what level of organization access they have, right? Full, read only, none, etc. This is also where you can delegate the owner's authority, provided you've chosen full for the organization access. And then you have the ability to activate the account or not. So generally you would leave this on no. It will send an email to the user based on this, and it will prompt them to click a link and go through and set up their password and give them access to that organization and finish setting that up. Now, if this is someone you know already has a Nebula account, you can say yes, and they'll be able to log in using their existing org credentials. So if you have set the organization level to none or read only, it will then prompt you to then create site level access. And that's done by this green button. So basically the screen goes from this to adding this green add button at the bottom. And that is where you are going to add site level. So you'll click add, it will pull up a list of sites in that organization. You choose the site you want, and then you choose the privilege level for that specific site. And you can add as many sites as you want, and you can mix and match your privileges based on the individual site. So when it comes to transferring owners, it's pretty easy to do. Again, you go to the org section, go to administrators, and it will show you all of your admins, including who is the current owner. So to change who that owner is, the first thing you do is you need to make sure that the new owner is an admin in that organization. So if they aren't already, you'll need to go through the steps we did on the earlier one here and create a new admin account for that person. Once you have done that, you will then have the ability to transfer ownership. So you simply go in, click the actions button, choose transfer ownership, select the new owner account, and confirm that you are sure you want to lose your ownership access and give it to somebody else. And then it will go ahead and save that and do the transfer for you. It's a very similar process for transferring devices between sites and organizations and transferring licenses between orgs or sites. So you simply go into your devices. It will pull up a list of all devices in the org. Use the checkbox to select which devices you want to transfer. And then under actions, you will have the ability to change the organization or change the site assignment. Or if you simply are removing the devices, you just simply remove them from the organization. It will then prompt you to select the new organization that you're going to transfer over to. And you hit save or finish, and it will automatically do that for you. It's the exact same process for licenses, except it will also ask you to choose, give you the option to choose which devices to assign those licenses to. Now, if you are using Plus or Pro Pack, this is important. Every device in the org, so if you have multiple sites, every device on every site in that org needs to have a license, a Plus or Pro license. Only when that happens will it give you the ability to convert your organization from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro Pack. So this often causes confusion because people will say, hey, I only want to add, a Pro Pack license for these switches here. I don't need it for the other devices. And the answer is that you won't be able to use those licenses until every device has a license assigned to it. Once you have assigned devices, you aren't done. You need to activate or upgrade that organization. So let's say you've got 10 devices, you have added 10 licenses, you've assigned those licenses to each device. You will then need to go to your licenses and inventory page, go to the overview tab, and click the upgrade now button. It will not do this automatically. And this is something that causes a lot of confusion for people because they think that, well, I've added the licenses, I'm good to go. You still need to hit that upgrade button so it knows to activate those licenses and start counting down the time on them. So choose upgrade now, confirm that yes, you do want to convert the org, and then you're done. Another thing in Nebula is we've got a lot of free trials for you. So you can access those by going to organization wide, licenses and inventory, and then switching over to the trials tab. And it will give you a list of all of the free 30-day trials that are available. And it will show you the status of those licenses. So if you, for instance, have not used it, you will have a nice green activate button here. If you've already used the trial, it will show you here trial expired. And if you are currently in a trial, it will show you how much time is left on that trial. Now, a key area here which causes some confusion is if you are using the 30-day Pro Pack trial, your organization will continue to show it is in base pack, and you will continue to have this little banner or the cross of the top of the interface letting you know that you're using the free version of Nebula. And that's because the 30-day trial is handled differently than having an actual license and upgrading the org. So it can cause some confusion because you log in and it says, hey, you're still using the base pack or the free version of Nebula when the trial is active. So just be aware of that. If you need to confirm it, you can always go back to that trial page and confirm that the trial is in progress and when the expiration date is. So hardware locking. This is something that also causes a little bit of confusion for people. So if you've used Nebula, you scan a QR code that can be found on the box or on the belly label of the device itself, and you assign that device to an org, and then it puts it and moves it over there. What a lot of people don't realize is even if a device has already been assigned to an org in a site, if you have access to that QR code, you can scan it and then assign that device to a different org or different site. This is actually a feature we added into Nebula by user request from some large MSPs to make it easier for them to swap out hardware and move hardware between sites. The feedback we got is, oftentimes we're having some issues. So the first step is swap out the hardware, swap in some new hardware, and see if the problem persists. And then we take the old hardware back. It gets put in the pool. And then next time we're doing a new deployment or we need to swap out some hardware, we simply take that hardware and move it back to the new site. And it was a real pain to try to keep track of, which devices were where, which device physically where each device is. And so this just made it easier for them to do that. So that is the default behavior these days in Nebula. But we understand a lot of you don't like that, or it opens you up to some problems where, for instance, and this has happened, someone has deployed Nebula at a hotel And then the hotel owner went around, scanned the QR code, and assigned the devices to their own Nebula org as they were trying to see what's, this QR code do. Oh, it opens up this Nebula app. Well, what does this do? And so suddenly several devices were no longer in the organization that was being managed by the MSP. So to prevent that from happening, you can disable this ability to scan and move devices once they've been done. And it's really easy. You just go into organization-wide manage, go to organization settings, and there is a feature there called device ownership takeover. And you simply toggle that off to stop this from being available as a tool for you to use. Another fairly recent change, I think about a year ago, is the ability to do alert aggregation. So to me at least, one of the more annoying things in Nebula was if you've got it set up to alert you when a device goes offline and the internet goes down, you would get a notification for every device in that organization. So if there were 30 devices in that organization that have lost their internet connectivity, you would get 30 notifications on your phone. So we've now given you the ability to aggregate those alerts. So you simply go to site-wide management, configure, and go to alert settings. And it's just a toggle to turn on alert aggregation. So that way it will aggregate the alerts. Basically, so everything that goes offline within a certain 5-minute window will get one notification instead of one notification for every device. So it's definitely something you probably want. This is just an example here showing before you would get all of these alerts. Now you're just getting one, which shows you the site and how many devices are currently offline. Moving forward here, static DHCP. There are different ways of doing it in Nebula, and some take priority over others. So I wanted to talk about this. So the easiest way to do static DHCP is to simply go into your client page where it shows you all the client devices that are currently connected to your network and all of the ones that have been connected to your network in the past, I forget how many hours. You simply put a checkbox next to the client device, choose reserve IP and hit apply. And now every time that device connects to your network, it will always get the same IP address, even if it's been months or years since that device has been connected. So it's reserving the IP for the device. So that's the easiest way to do it. The challenge you run into is you can't specify the IP address. It's just going to keep whichever IP address was currently assigned to it using DHCP. So if you want to manually be able to specify a specific IP address for a specific device, instead of using the client page in the reserve IP policy, instead you go to the interface page for your USG Flex or your USG Lite, and then choose the static DHCP table. So this requires a little bit of extra work though, because you have to type in the IP address you want the device to have, and you must also type in the MAC address of the device. So if you don't know the MAC address, you have to go check it on the device, or you can go back to that client's page, and every client we show their MAC address. You can copy and paste it from there, go back to interface and put it in here. So interface page static DHCP table is the most flexible way of doing this, but it requires some extra effort on you. Client page is the easiest way to do it, but you can't specify the IP address. And if you do it for the same device in both interfaces, the static DHCP table takes preference over the reserve IP policy. Next up here, I won't go through all of these, but these are the ports that you need to allow outbound traffic to your Nebula devices in order for them to work. So if you completely shut down outbound traffic, Nebula won't be able to talk to, or your Nebula devices won't be able to talk to the cloud, and they aren't going to be able to work. So if you just Google this Nebula ports, it should pull this up pretty quickly and easily for you using Google. Obviously, Google search results aren't what they once were, but I think it still works pretty easily to find this list. It is published on our support page. It is, I think, also published in our community forums. So if you need this, you know you need to open up some ports. These are the ports you need. Um, Talking about now some device specific things. When it comes to our access point, we often get calls because you have gone into there, you have set power to say 30 dBm. But when you look at the actual monitor or status page of the device, the power being shown will not match what you selected. So why is that? And the answer for that is this drop down menu. When you go in and set your maximum power, that's what this is, the maximum power that we allow. And this is applied to all of your access points. And because you may have different models of access point, or you may add some different models in the future, this is basically a maximum setting, not a minimum setting. So the actual maximum that your device will be able to achieve will depend on the specs of the AP itself. It will also depend on the specific frequency it is using. So for instance, we have one setting here for 5 gigahertz that you can use the drop down and then choose, say, for instance, 30 dBm. So if the access point is only capable of hitting 26 dBm, that's all you're going to see there. In addition, when it comes to 5 and 6 gigahertz, there are different FCC rules on power output based on the specific 5 or 6 gigahertz channel you are using. So it's possible you can have two of the same AP and you will see two different output powers because one AP is on a channel that allows higher output power than the channel being used by the other AP. And then we did for a while here have an issue where 6E devices showed the incorrect power output. It was a chipset driver issue, and I think the chipset driver was eventually fixed. I keep saying I'm going to go check that and verify if that was actually implemented or not. But unfortunately, I keep forgetting to do that, and I need to do that. Andrew here has a question he sent in. Is there an on-prem deployment option by any chance? So the short answer is yes. So Nebula is our cloud management platform. You do not have to use it. You can always, just put the APs in standalone mode and just go to the IP address and manage them and configure them directly. We do have some software you can download, which will automatically scan your network, find all Zyxel devices, and give you a quick link to the web interface of all those devices it found. But if you're looking to do more of a traditional local area controller, that is supported by our W series access points. So any W series access point can work with our local controller. And these days, that controller is built into our USG Flex series of products. So you can use the USG Flex as a dedicated controller device on the network, or you can use it as a security appliance that also has local controller operating at the same time, depending on what your application is. Okay, back to the slides. Next up, we'll talk about multiple SSIDs. So this is something that you can use to create different SSIDs that broadcast out there. So when you do use multiple SSIDs, the standard way of doing this is going to be each SSID is put on its own VLAN. You then configure VLANs on your switch and gateway to isolate those different SSIDs from each other and control which local area resources that SSID has access to. So traditionally, for instance, your accounting team may be on a different SSID than your warehouse team because the accounting team doesn't need to access warehouse resources and the warehouse team doesn't need to access accounting resources. The other common way of using this is for guest access, right? So you have one SSID for one or more SSIDs for your employees, and then you have a separate SSID for your guests. So your guests don't have access to your local resources. So that's how you would normally do this. We also have the ability, and this is kind of cool, on our APs to be able to enable NAT on the AP itself. So instead of your router providing NAT, you can set it up so the AP itself sets up its own NAT on a per SSID basis. So that way you can put those guest users on their own subnet or different IP range than your local users. A very common problem we run into is your customer wants to use or provide guest Wi-Fi access, but their existing infrastructure doesn't support VLANs and they're cheap and they don't want to upgrade their network to be able to support VLANs. So what do you do? And with Zyxel, the answer to that is we offer a feature called Layer 2 isolation that you can enable on a specific SSID. And this basically blocks all outbound traffic from wireless users unless that traffic is going to a whitelisted MAC address. So the most common way of using this is you put the MAC address of your gateway as the only device they can send traffic to, so they can only access the internet. Now, we often get questions about this because someone will connect to the guest SSID. They'll run some sort of scanning app and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, I can see your local resources. And the answer to that is yes, you can. Multicast traffic being sent to the AP will still be sent to all of the wireless users when you're using layer 2 isolation. So anything that is sending sending multicast traffic, your wireless user will be able to detect that if they've got a scanning app of some sort. However, they still cannot access those devices because they cannot send any packets to those devices. So they won't be able to access any local resources, but they may be able to see that you do have certain local resources available based on the multicast traffic that those devices are sending onto the network. Now we have a toggle here, which makes this easy. So when you're creating a new SSID, there is a toggle that just says guest network. You hit that toggle, it will automatically enable layer 2 isolation. It will also enable intra BSS blocking. So wireless users will not be able to send data to other wireless users, or at least targeted data at other wireless users, and they will not be able to send data to anything except for whitelisted MAC addresses on the local area network. So Andrew had a follow-up question about Nebula. So no, Nebula is asking if there's a standalone option. So no, Nebula itself is a cloud-hosted management platform. It is it is hosted on Amazon AWS, and we maintain and operate that. So if you want to use Nebula, your Nebula devices are connecting to our Nebula cloud in AWS. There is no private version of Nebula or local version of Nebula that you can operate and use your own version of Nebula. Anonymous attendee is asking here, can you create the same captive portal for all APs at multiple locations? So captive portal configuration is done on a site basis. So all APs within a site will have the same configuration. If you want to do multiple sites using the same configuration, unfortunately, you will need to duplicate that configuration on each site. Or when you're creating those sites, I believe you can use the ability to clone an existing site, and I believe that will also clone the captive portal settings over to the new sites that you create. The other thing you can always do is you can use an external captive portal landing page. So by default, Nebula hosts the captive portal that they are directed to in C, but you can always set up your own self-hosted landing page with whatever features and information you want in it. And we will give you the code that you integrate into that captive portal page to allow them to authenticate and log in. So if you want them to be able to register with your own special database, or you want them to enter certain information before they go online, or you just want to present certain tools and information before you grant them access to the internet, you can do that using your own self-hosted captive portal page. And in that case, you would just go into the captive portal settings on each site and use that same URL for the redirect. So you've only got, one landing page for all your different sites. Oliver is asking, can we connect a Nebula API to Datto RMM? So we do have a Nebula API that is out there for you. I can't remember if we've got slides coming up on it or not in today's presentation, but you can just Google search Zyxel Nebula API. It'll take you to the API page. You can log in and get access to it. As I understand it right now, we do not have any official tie-ins to any different RMM solutions that are out there. We open up the API and you can use it however you want, but it's going to be up to you or your RMM provider to integrate those API calls into the software you are using. And the answer to that is because there is no RMM that we've gotten enough requests from different users to support. Um, for us to spend time reaching out and talking to the different RMMs. And the same thing sort of goes the other way. Even when we do reach out to an RMM, if they don't have their customers specifically asking them to integrate with us, they tend to give us the cold shoulder, right? They've got limited resources to integrate different third parties. So if you want, Datto RMM to work with our Nebula API, in addition to letting your salesperson know that you would like that, you at Zyxel, you also need to be reaching out to Datto and pushing them to work with that. And we would be happy to interface with them and get that up and running. Okay, back to the slides for now. Channel utilization. So this is something that our tech support wanted us to put into today's webinar, and that is that one of the most common tools that's there for you that tends to get overlooked when it comes to troubleshooting Wi-Fi issues is this channel utilization graph. So one of the most common sources of problems leading to people calling into tech support has to do with channel overutilization. So you can use this chart to see if that's what's going on. Are there too many devices using the channel that your AP is currently using? And that's why you're having the connectivity issues that you're running into. So when it comes to wireless roaming, there's a lot of confusion. The official 802.11 spec dating all the way back to the late 90s specifies that roaming is handled by the client. So if you're having roaming issues, it has to do with the client device and whatever software or algorithm that software is using to determine when and how to roam. So in particular, Apple devices historically hate roaming and refuse to do it. I think that it is better these days, but it absolutely, in the past and with older devices, has been a nightmare. So basically, it's the client device to periodically scan the RF environment, see which other APs are broadcasting the same SSID, and to determine when that other devices have a stronger signal and to make the jump over to them. And Apple just doesn't like doing that, or at least historically has wanted to connect to one AP and then never ever roam, even if the connectivity goes away. As long as there is a sliver of signal that that device can see, even if it's not usable, it will continue to stay connected. So there are some tools that you can use to make this a little bit better, although a lot of clients don't actually support them. And that is there is what we call assisted roaming, which is 802.11 K and V. And then there is 802.11R, which speeds up or reduces any downtime when you are transitioning from one AP to another AP. So these are things that you can enable in Nebula to hopefully help with that. However, saying that, you normally end up having to use what's called smart steering. So that is a feature in Nebula. And it lets you tell the access point to kick off a client device when the signal strength as measured at the access point drops below a certain setting. And you do that on basically a per radio basis. Your 2.4, your 5, and your 6 gigahertz radios all have their own unique setting. And you can choose here to optimize how aggressive it is at forcing them off. So basically what's going to happen is your client device, it will see your client device signal strength, again, as measured at the access point, drops below this threshold. It will then disconnect them. And it will then prevent them from reconnecting for a certain period of time, which is largely what the optimization aggressiveness is managing. And the idea behind this is a lot of devices, you kick them off, they will immediately try to reconnect to that same AP. But if you kick them off long enough, it will actually scan the environment and say, oh, what do you know? There's another AP nearby with the same SSID that's got a lot stronger signal. Maybe I should connect to that. So that's what this does for you. And so, depending on the type of device, you may want to adjust your aggressiveness because obviously you don't want to kick people off and keep them from reconnecting if the reason the signal strength is low is because that's the only AP in the area for them. So, that's something you have to tweak. So, the default settings that are in Nebula are probably not the settings you want to use. So, our channel sales engineer has come up with these suggestions. These suggest that you set 2.4 to negative 69 as the cutoff, 5 gigahertz to negative 72 is the cutoff, and then negative 75 is the cutoff for 6 gigahertz clients. And again, you may need to tweak that based on your environment, the type of clients you're using, and the algorithm those clients are using for roaming. So, a feature we have in Nebula on our switches that is pretty cool is automated VLAN. So instead of needing to go in and set up manually VLANs based on ports or setting up and manually having to configure the individual MAC address for each device, Nebula has the ability to recognize the device and move it automatically to a certain VLAN. So there are two ways of doing this in Nebula that we will go through here. And this is instead of based on the full MAC address for the device, is based on the OUI. So the OUI is the first, I want to say 6 digits that are in a MAC address that essentially identify who the manufacturer of that device is. So essentially you're setting rules in place that say, hey, if you see this device, see a device from this manufacturer, put it onto this VLAN. So the most common use of this is voice VLANs, right? You've got a certain vendor or manufacturer of your IP phones that you're using in the office. So you simply choose that and it will automatically say, hey, that is a Digium IP phone. Let's put that on the voice VLAN. So targeting on voice VLAN is the most common way of doing this. So you turn it on, you specify the VLAN ID that is being used for your voice VLAN. You set the priority for that VLAN, and then you assign the VLAN by OUI. And it's actually a drop down. We have a drop down of most different manufacturers, and you go through and add the ones you want to automatically assign to that voice VLAN. Now, if this is not for voice VLAN, we also have a vendor ID. So for instance, you may have your voice VLAN for your IP phones, but you may also want to set up automatic VLAN for, say, your IP cameras. So you can have both of these activated at the same time, the voice VLAN and then vendor ID based VLAN. So with vendor ID based VLAN, you need to manually specify the OUI. So instead of having the drop down of IP phones like we have on the voice setting, this is much more flexible. It can work with cameras, it can work with laptops, it can work with device scanners, it can work with anything you want. So because of that, there's just too many different manufacturers to have a drop down. So you manually put in the OUI for the devices you're deploying and can specify which VLANs to put those specific devices on. And you can do this on multiple types of devices, right? You can set this up so your IP cameras are put on VLAN 2 and your warehouse scanners are put on VLAN 12 or whatever it happens to be. So another feature here which causes some calls is the storm control feature, which I believe is enabled automatically on our switches, which are just there. It's there. The default setting is to alert you in the logs when certain ports are being flooded with packets. So this is historically there to let you know that, hey, some user on your network has been infected with some sort of worm and it is spamming the network looking for other devices to infect, or somebody's part of a botnet and that botnet is spamming packets because it's trying to DDoS somebody or some device. Again, just like with our our assisted roaming or smart roaming, the default settings aren't probably what you want to use. And specifically, it's basically by default set to 100 packets per second. And what we have heard here is that's just too sensitive. So when you're looking through your logs, people will see that and see lots of log entries saying that storm control has identified a packet storm. So our suggestion is to change it to 200 or 300 packets per second, because even going to something like a Facebook web page, which has a million different servers and ad platforms and various other things that may be getting loaded in, video players, etc. Just going to a single Facebook page can generate more than 100 packets per second, and can trigger this. So bump it up to 200 or 300, and you should get a lot less false positives in your logs. Next suggestion, and this is from me, is use our AI chat. Um, our AI chat functionality, like most AI chat functionalities, kind of sucks, but I do want you to use it. So why am I telling you to use something that I think doesn't work too well? And that's because it doesn't work too well at its main job, which is you ask it a question and it provides you an answer. And if you're lucky, it doesn't hallucinate or it doesn't misunderstand what you're asking. Um, but that's not always the case. Anybody that's used a lot of AI stuff knows that hallucinations are common. I always like to say AI is great if you don't know the subject matter, but when you actually do know the subject matter, you start realizing just how often AI hallucinates or gets things wrong. Um, and that is no different for our chatbot that we're using here, especially since it isn't the most powerful AI chatbot that's out there. But what it is really good at doing is providing links to our source materials, which do answer your question. So my suggestion is, for instance, you want to do static DHCP. You haven't been through today's webinar before, so you don't know about the two different ways of doing it or don't know how to configure it. Open up the chat window, type in static DHCP, ignore the answer it gives you. In this case, it's right, but it's hard to read, but it will always give you the sources. And those sources are where you have the information you're probably looking for in a format that's easy to read, comprehend, and understand. So you can always find this manually yourself, but if you've been to the help page in Nebula, you know we've got too much documentation. There's too many user manuals. There's too many support notes. There's too many posts on the community forums, and it's hard to search those. So our AI chatbot should be considered a unified search engine for all of our support materials, and it works fantastic for that. So this is my go-to. You have a question, there's a feature in Nebula you want to use the AI chat. And based on my own playing with this, it's easier just to name the feature. Just name the feature, static DHCP, voice VLAN. So you're in Nebula and you've come across an option, you don't know what that option is or does. Pop open that chat menu, cut and paste the name or the terminology you're seeing in the GUI for that feature, and then click through to the sources that it pulls up to learn. And with that, we are done with today's Nebula webinar. So go ahead if you have questions, use chat or Q&A and send those in to me. And while I wait for that, there is one topic I wanted to talk about, which is sort of related to Nebula, and that is Wi-Fi 7 is changing. Basically, the rules put forth by the Wi-Fi Alliance change either this month or next month as to how the default Wi-Fi 7 configuration works. So starting in July, it will be mandatory that any radio operating with Wi-Fi 7 mode must support MLO, and it must be enabled. So it will automatically at some point in July, when you update your firmware, any SSIDs or radios configured to use Wi-Fi 7 will automatically enable MLO. Not a big deal, shouldn't cause any issues. But there is something that is going to cause some issues, and that is the Wi-Fi Alliance is making support for WPA3 mandatory. So any radios using Wi-Fi 7, even if you currently have them configured to use WPA2, will have to switch to WPA3 encryption. So this may cause some issues, one, because some client devices don't support WPA3. And believe me, I've got a bunch of those. And certain features like dynamic pre-shared key by definition will not work with WPA3. So WPA3 basically breaks dynamic pre-shared key, and that is a feature, not a bug. Um, so if you're using dynamic pre-shared key, you may find that it no longer works once you've updated to this July firmware. Alternately, you know, if you've got a radio setup that's in Wi-Fi 7 mode, but you're allowing your Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 4 devices to connect to that radio, you aren't going to be able to do that anymore if that radio is operating in Wi-Fi 7 mode, because older devices, except for maybe some Wi-Fi 6 devices, don't support WPA3, right? Your 11AC or 11N devices don't support WPA3. So because of that, they will no longer be able to connect to that radio that's operating in Wi-Fi 7 mode. So because of this reason, by default, we will automatically switch your 2.4 and 5 gigahertz radio to Wi-Fi 6 instead of Wi-Fi 7. So we'll disable Wi-Fi 7, put them in Wi-Fi 6 mode, because only Wi-Fi 6 mode is going to be backwards compatible with the encryption standards supported by older versions of Wi-Fi. So anyway, that I just wanted to bring that up. I'm just finding out about this and figured I'd use today's webinar to start informing people about it. I believe an email has already gone out to anybody that has signed up for our forums. I don't know if it's gone out to everybody yet that has a My Zyxel account or not, but it will. We do have a question here asking about hypothetical pricing. So this is for Andrew. So Andrew, hopefully you're still here. We have 5 sites with 300 managed devices each. What would pricing look like? So I'm going to assume ProPack just to keep things simple. So again, it is done on an org basis. So if your org has 5 sites and each of those 5 sites has 300 devices, right? That means you've got 1,500 devices if I'm doing the mental math right, and I may not be. I am extremely tired. So you would have 1,500 devices. So you would need to have 1,500 ProPack licenses to convert that org to ProPack. And those licenses are sold for roughly $30 per device. So $30 times 1,500 would get you all of your devices connected to Nebula for 1 year. Now, assuming you are one of our partners and you are a reseller, you would be buying at wholesale prices, so pricing would be a little bit less than that. And I will go ahead and talk about this really quickly. If you are an end user and not a reseller, you can go into Nebula. You can go through and give it a date that you want your licenses to be good through, and it will spit out a report telling you which licenses you need to buy and how many of each. You can then give that to your VAR or MSP reseller, and they can get those licenses for you. We also have the ability to pass that information to Marketplace, which is an online licensing store. And you can then automatically buy the licenses through that and have them assigned back to your organization. But you'll probably be paying a little bit more than if you buy through your VAR or reseller that you originally bought your hardware for. Now, if you are one of our partners and resellers, instead of using Marketplace, you can buy those licenses through Circle. So Circle is our online store for resellers, and you will get at least some version of our partner discount through that. And you'll be able to instantly buy your licenses and push them back over to the organization. Or you can buy the licenses. Again, you can spit out that report and give that to whichever distributor you like to buy through, Synex, Ingram Micro, etc. And they will quote you for those licenses and you'll be able to buy them there. So usually the online store, whether Marketplace or Circle, is the fastest way to buy licenses. The cheapest way to buy licenses is usually going to be through your distributor or through your reseller. So your choice, you want ease of use, or you want to save some money. But yeah, Nebula licenses are generally roughly around $30 per device per year, or $35 per device per year. It should be very, very affordable. Plus Pack, I want to say, is around $12 per device per year, compared to something like Meraki, which is $120 to $160 per device per year. And unlike them, licenses expire. You always can fall back to the free version of Nebula. You never get locked out. None of these licenses are mandatory for the core features and functionality of your devices. And I think with that, there are no other questions that have come in. So I am going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you do have some questions, you can always email me, or you can always email your sales rep, Andy, David, or Jacob, and they'll be able to get you those answers. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you on one of our future webinars. We usually do webinars. The more general webinars are usually on Thursdays, and the more specific or technical webinars are usually on Tuesdays. But that's not always the case. So thank you for joining us. Hope to see you soon.